I have a mother-in-law that is actually considered a nightmare. Let me explain. She's racist, but it does not end there, trust me. If it was just me and her having to go head-to-head with each other, I wouldn't care, okay? I can handle it. I'm a big girl. But the problem is, she decided to involve my daughter, who, by the way, is 7 years old, and she is a pure soul. She doesn't know any evil in this world yet, and the first evil that she's running into is her, grandmother, my mother-in-law, and today's story is a nightmare, and I'm going to make it a dream. My mother-in-law, B, she's always been a thorn in my side since the day I married my husband, Rick. All this time, I've tolerated her racism and her dislike towards me. But guys, today, I might just lose it, because today she went beyond troubling me and just instead bothered my daughter, Jane. Well, my daughter's 7. I could have stayed quiet until it was only me she had a problem with, but involving my daughter, this might just be the declaration I needed for war. Well, I'm Amelia, and according to my mother-in-law, my biggest fault on earth is simply being born as a woman of color. Yes, it's not clear by now. B is a huge racist and has been my #1 hater even before I stepped inside of the house. Well, let me tell you about how it all started so that you get the complete picture, guys. My husband and I have been besties during high school, but we drifted away when he had to transfer to another school. But we reconnected right back when we bumped into each other on a vacation some 10 years ago. And as happy as we were, having found each other again, well, there was one person who wasn't happy at all. Well, you guessed it right, it was B, my mother-in-law. She had hated me even as a kid when we used to play together. She told Rick to stay away from the children of my kind, essentially meaning to stay away from a kid whose skin color is not white or porcelain. B's mind worked in a twisted, disgusting way. I mean, whoever is not white is inferior, and doesn't deserve to be involved in her life in any sort of way. So you can imagine her disgust when she found out that I was back in Rick's life, and this time not just as his best friend, but I'm coming back as his girlfriend. She tried her bestest to break us up. Firstly, she tried to fill Rick's mind against me, and when that didn't work, she would introduce Rick to other white girls. But none of her tricks seemed to work since Rick made it clear to her that he wanted to be with me. But this didn't stop her. When she could not break us up, she tried to get our wedding canceled. She even feigned having a stroke and asked Rick and his father to rush her to the hospital. Well, obviously it was fake, and only a ploy to get Rick to cancel the wedding. Because, it's going to cause as much as Rick was aware of his mother's bitter behavior towards me. She was still his mother, after all. So, even after her evil ways, Rick cared for his mom a lot. But the funny thing was that, even though B's fake stroke got our wedding interrupted, she could not stop Rick from actually marrying me. So there I was, the woman she despised so much, right in front of her eyes in her own house. This time as his daughter-in-law. Things only got worse for me after our wedding, you see. But by then I had gotten habitual to the racist slurs and dislike that Bay threw into my direction. Well, after all, they were all just some harmless insults, so I could handle that much. I really thought that things would change when I got pregnant 3 years after the wedding, hoping that B might soften up, and if not for me, then maybe for her grandbaby. But no, that woman's racism, it went beyond any family bonds, and she was scared of the fact that I might give birth to somebody who looked exactly like me. A monster, as she would say. I ignored her as I always did, and I was even happy as my husband was there all throughout my pregnancy. But 9 months later, B's worst fears came to life when she saw the face of the child that I've just given birth to. My daughter, Jane, was a mix of complexion. Her skin wasn't as dark as mine, but to B, nothing other than white was acceptable. So, she goes about making a whole fuss about how she always wanted white grandbabies, who look like her, but as always, all I did was disappoint her. As much as her words hurt me, I was glad that I had the support of my husband and my father-in-law, Hector. Unlike his wife, Hector had always been accepting of me since the day I came to the family. So that's how our last 7 years went. Me being busy taking care of my little Jane, and B being a busy bee showering me with insults, and how me and my baby were both equally disappointing. However, after some time, her insults, they stopped. I guess at some point in time, she must have gotten tired of insulting me over the same thing again and again. Well, I had quit my job when Jane was born, but when she turned 6 years of age and my father-in-law announced his retirement, he just assured me that if I wanted, I could continue my work as B, and he would take care of Jane while I was working. Well, obviously, I was skeptical of leaving my kid in B's hands. My father-in-law, though, reassured me that he would make sure that none of B's biases worked towards Jane. So, with my husband's support and my father-in-law's reassurance, I stepped back into my career just a year ago. All was going well, and I was assured that B and Hector were taking good care of Jane. Hector more than B, as she usually keeps her distance. I was actually happy about it, but all of it changed this evening. Rick and I were out for our jobs, and I already knew that B was having some kind of tea party for her church group, as she intentionally got me late for work this morning. Just because I had to run a last-minute errand for her and get her the specific kind of homemade cookies that her rich elite friends liked so much. But I was still not worried about the whole thing, because I knew, as always, Hector would be there to take care of Jane. But when this afternoon, I get a call from Hector saying he had to leave town and would only be back by the evening, as he had some family emergencies, guys, I absolutely freaked out. I was out of town for a conference, and I would not be able to get back home before the evening drops. So, I call up Rick and ask him to get home ASAP, but Rick was also busy with the meeting. So, he assures me that there's nothing that we need to worry about, as his mom would look after Jane while Hector was gone. But none of this seemed to calm me down after I was just getting restless. Restless to get back home to my daughter, and you might all be thinking that I was just overreacting and blowing the situation out of proportion. But you have to take into account that this woman has been nothing but harsh towards my baby since the day that she was born. So, you can't blame me for worrying that without Hector to keep B in check, she might say something to Jane that could impact her young mind and leave her, I don't know, with some trauma, maybe for the rest of her life. And I was right. Well, was I? 100%, yeah. But only if it was worse than I thought. I was scared that B might say something cruel to Jane, but she crossed all the limits today, guys. As restless as I was getting about my child, I left my conference in the middle and got the first flight home. When I got home, I found B casually enjoying her tea party with all of her church friends, but Jane was nowhere in sight. So, when B noticed me standing there, the color drained from her face. I waited for no greetings whatsoever and asked where Jane was. B just tells me that she didn't know for sure, but she must be in her room playing or something, and she tried to act as normal as possible. As I was shocked at her carelessness and ignorance towards her own grandkid, I'm sure if Jane had been a white child, B would not be so ignorant or so casual about her upbringing. So, as I rushed towards Jane's room, I heard her cries, and guys, my heart sank when I found her at the door to her room, and she's been locked from the outside. When I opened up the door, Jane rushed into my arms and cried inconsolably. I was shocked that, in spite of Jane's loud crying, B did not check up on her and was busy just enjoying her little tea party. After some time, I was finally able to calm Jane down somewhat and just get her to tell me exactly what happened. That's when Jane tells me that B had asked her to stay in her room throughout Jane's tea party, so that a hideous kid like her did not embarrass B in front of all her little church friends. And as Jane was outside playing inside, she heard the bolt turn outside. When Jane noticed that she was locked, she starts to cry. But no one came to get her until I got there, and I felt so bad for my poor baby, as she has been locked in that small tiny room for God knows how long. But I'm glad that I followed my instincts and rushed back home, or else who knows how long, well, Jane would have been here. I tried to confront B about all this, but as she was busy at her tea party, she told me to stop embarrassing her in front of her church members. I just went upstairs to my room and straight away called Rick and Hector and asked them to get home as soon as possible. Well, Jane has been crying all the while, and I finally got her to calm down and go to sleep about an hour ago. Now I'm writing this while she sleeps next to me sound, and the little soul had to go through so much today. Who knows how scared she would have been all alone locked inside of a small room. I'm just so furious at B right now, but the only reason I'm not pelting her with insults is just because I know my children. B would not matter much to them, and that's why I'm just waiting for Rick and Hector to get here so that they can just put some sense into this crazy woman before I lose it and teach her a lesson myself. That's why I'm even here, writing this all, because I don't know what else to do. You know, all my pent-up anger while I wait for Rick and Hector to get here. While we're at it, I would also like some suggestions from you guys as to how I should go around dealing with B. You know, now, because one thing is for sure, after what she did, I'm not going to let her off the hook easily. So, guys, any suggestions or advice would be greatly appreciated. Comment number 1. Oh my gosh, this is truly insane. I can't even imagine how badly your daughter must have been affected by the whole incident. These kind of things leave a very bad impact on children's minds, and I just hope she's doing okay now. As for what you should do about your situation, now I say you should call this monster-in-law out for her bullcrap and teach her an apparent lesson for it. Honestly, hats off to you for your patience for bearing all this until now. If it was I would have lost my calm years ago, but it seems like you're the kind of person who values family more than anything. But I'll still advise you not to take any more of her crap from now on. Sending love to you and to your daughter. Oh, comment number 2. Gosh, this is stupid. You're blaming your mother-in-law for how she's been harshly treating you and your daughter all the time, while in reality, it's you that's been at fault. You already said that she's been like this before you even got married to your husband, then why bother staying with her and take all this crap? Just grow a spine and move out, dude. To me, you sound like a wimp who won't ever take a stand for yourself in the name of ignorance. Ugh, is this the kind of example you want to set for your daughter? To keep your head low and just to take whatever insults they throw at you? Come on, it's high time that you cut the crap and retaliate. If not for yourself, then for your daughter, at least. Update number 1. Hey guys, it's me again. It's been about, 2 complete months since my mother-in-law locked my daughter up in the room? A lot of things have changed since then, like insanely changed. So much so that it's almost unbelievable. But before getting into that, I'd like to address some of the comments on my previous post. Many of you were wondering that if mother-in-law's so problematic, then why am I still living with her? Then let me tell you guys, that since my father-in-law's retirement, Rick, and my earnings have been the only source of income for running this house. Without our earnings, B and Hector might find it hard to make ends meet. And we do earn well, but we don't have so much money just to bear the expenses of 2 households. Come on. Well, so as cruel as B is, she's still Rick's mother, and Rick cares a lot about his parents. So he can't just abandon them like that, and this is the sole reason why I haven't suggested moving out to Rick, as I don't want to just be someone who makes him pick between his parents and myself. So as difficult as it is for me to cope with this, living with B is the harsh truth of my life. Also, for all the people worried about my daughter's well-being, well, thank you for your genuine concern that all of you have showed for Jane. I mean, the response was very overwhelming. Jane is good and back to normal, and as shocking as it is, B has been a part of helping Jane overcome the fear that the incident left with her. Yeah, you heard it right, B has been helping her. Well, I was surprised, as you guys probably are. So 2 months back, on the day of the incident, when Rick and Hector finally got home, Hector went all angry with B for putting Jane through so much. But at that point, B just spun the whole story around. She said that Jane must have been locked in the room by mistake. It wasn't intentional. Ugh, yeah, right. Though, obviously, none of us even believed her story. She seemed to be genuinely remorseful of her actions, though. Oh, that was something I've never seen before, but still, Hector warned her that if now she kept as much as a foot out of line, he would make sure to kick, B out of the house. I thought that ought to set her straight. Well, after some days of the incident, something happened that I did not expect even in my wildest of dreams. B apologized to me, not just for the incident, but also for the years of insults and straight-up cruelty that she's put me through, and I was shocked, but Bae just told me that the fear of getting separated from her husband and son, it finally opened up her eyes to the reality of how harsh that she's been towards me. Of course, I didn't believe her at that moment. I thought it was all a ploy to get something. But it's been 2 months and Bae has been nothing but kind and accepting towards Jane and me, and I know it's crazy. And I don't completely believe her, as the resentment of so many years can't just vanish like that. But Hector and Rick were very happy with this development. So, I guess she might be doing all this just for fears of getting kicked out. Whatever the reason may be, we've all decided to give her a second chance. Well, I'd say not entirely. I'm still skeptical about her true motives because, after what B put me through all these years, I can never, and I mean never, fully trust that woman. But for the past 2 months, she's been trying to make an effort with Jane, and I know the relationship between us is beyond mending. But I don't want to rob her of the chance to have a bond with her granddaughter if she's genuinely willing to put effort into it. Also, Jane is very happy with this newfound attention she's getting from her grandmother, since she's always just craved B's love. Lately, the two of them have developed a routine. For the past few weeks, B has been dropping off and picking up Jane from school. Hector used to do that, but since he fell ill last month, he's been a bit weak, so B very enthusiastically took it upon herself for responsibility. Though Hector and Rick were happy with B's involvement in Jane's life, this was kinda suspicious to me. I just can't seem to get off the feeling that B has some ulterior motives behind all this. As exciting and happy as she seems about accompanying Jane to all the school-related activities, it just makes me skeptical, you know? I mean, I don't know if I'm the jerk for not giving her a second chance to redeem her mistake, but I just can't help it. I've decided to follow B and see if there's any other reasons why B is so excited about the whole thing. Well, let's hope she just is in for it for Jane's sake. Well, what do you guys think? Am I just overthinking the whole situation? Should I also just try to trust B? You know, maybe she's trying to be a better person like Hector and Rick did. I don't know. Update number 2. Hey! Let me surprise you all by the fact that my mother-in-law never fails to prove me wrong. It's been a week since my last update where I told you guys how B has been trying to make an effort with Jane all of a sudden. She's even fallen into the routine of picking up and dropping Jane off at school. I also told you guys my concern about the same and my plan to follow B and, as she drops Jane off. I was right in thinking that B has some ulterior motives for being this caring grandmother, and it's definitely true. So, last Monday, when I followed B while she was going to drop Jane, I didn't notice anything weird until the moment B pulled up in an abandoned parking lot, right next to the school after dropping off Jane. It didn't make sense to me why B would park all over there, but it all made sense when another car pulls up and a younger guy gets out of the car. And to my surprise, he kissed B. Well, I was taken back by what I was witnessing. Right there in front of my eyes, I would have recorded all of it if I could, but it was so dark in the parking lot that the cameras wouldn't even be able to catch it. Anyways, but thanks to B flashing her headlights on the man when he was getting out of his car, one thing that I did catch is that the man was wearing an ID from the school. You know, the same sort of ID that I'd seen all the school staff wear. Unfortunately, she shut the lights as soon as we were back to dark, so I couldn't record the nasty proof of what she's been doing all this while under the pretense of bonding with her grandbaby. And that's why I got the clear picture of why B has been so happy when she went to drop off or pick up Jane. Poor Hector thought she was trying to bond with her granddaughter while she was out here cheating on him with someone involved with Jane's school. After what I witnessed in my failure at getting solid evidence about B's infidelity, I left the parking lot as soon as I could so that B might not catch me following her. or else she would become more cautious. I mean, it's funny how all this time we were thinking that B was so concerned about Jane's upbringing that she wanted to be more involved, while the truth was that she was just buying more time for her scandalous affairs. So naturally, I was curious who this guy from school was and how B must have met her. So I planned on looking for this guy in Jane's school when I went to the parent-teacher meeting yesterday. But I didn't have to work too hard, as it turns out that this guy is Jane's new homeroom teacher, Brent. He's 36, and he's been working here just for the past few weeks, and that's why we haven't ever met until now. The man seems new to town altogether, though my curiosity about the identity of the man was satiated. Now I had another question in my mind. How did B meet this guy? Because as far as I remember, she's never been to Jane's meetings or anything. All of those would be attended by Rick or me. And while dropping Jane off, she won't be stepping inside the school, so it doesn't make sense, well, how she met this man. The man is new in town, so he can't even be her old acquaintance. I don't know. My thoughts are very conflicted right now, because before I can go to Hector or Rick with this information, I do need some solid proof, as none of them would be willing to accept that someone they've known all their life is betraying them like this. So, I have to get some evidence against B and her lover, but right now all I want to know is how B actually met him in the first place, because I'm actually curious if B knew this man beforehand, and that's why she was so excited to visit school campus daily. Or if she met this man after she started dropping Jane. It's just all too confusing. Well, I'll try to find out and get some evidence against her. Let's just hope I do something to get strong. I'll update you guys once I have a bit of development. Update number 3. Oh my gosh, guys. Wow. You won't believe how happy I am right now. I finally made B pay for what she did to my daughter back then and how she has been using her as a ploy to work out their affair. And meet her mystery man. Well, as you know, the mystery man was not such a mystery anymore. A week back in my last update, I told you guys that the man Brent is Jane's homeroom teacher. And as per the mystery of how he might have met B, well, it's all crystal clear now. It turns out Brent is a member of the same church that B is a part of. Not only that, he's the priest's son of all people, so not only is she committing the sin of infidelity, but in her church it's just also prohibited to form romantic relations with the other church members. So, B is committing 2 sins at once, and this is what I took advantage of to teach B a lesson. I'll get to that in a moment, guys, but before that, you must be a bit curious about how I found out all this information. So, last week, after I unveiled the truth about B's cheating, I went home and continued acting as if everything was normal. I let her pretend and fake concern for Jane and me, because I wanted to catch her off guard, and I knew I had to get some proof against her so that Hector and Rick would believe me. To do all that, I started becoming more involved in B's life, and went with her to the church some days along with Jane. You can imagine Jane's delight when she saw her favorite teacher standing there singing along with the whole choir band perfectly. And that's when it was crystal clear to me, not just the part of how B met Brent, but also the plan of what I have to do next. So, I already knew about the fundraiser that B's church was hosting the next week. B had told me about it and asked me to show up with her for the same. And she might be trying to pretend to be a good mother-in-law after the interruption at the tea party all the time back. I just knew this fundraiser would be the perfect opportunity for me to get the revenge for the trauma that she put my daughter through. And then for using her as a means to hide her affair? The fundraiser was this morning, and it was a hit show. Hell yeah, it was, but it was a nightmare for Bay and Brent. Definitely. So what I did was, before I went along with B to the church, I visited the church last night, and after checking it out, I found this abandoned shed near it, which would be perfect spot for people who were dating in secrecy. Yeah, well, it might sound crazy, but I was baiting my breath on the chances of B and Brent slipping in and doing something during the charity event. It was a very crazy plan to expect them to sneak out of the charity event for the sake of their affair, but if anything, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity, just for them to sneak out and spend some time together. Well, I was playing a gamble, leaving it all up to assumptions, and as I said, This shed was the perfect little rendezvous spot. So, risking it all, I placed hidden cameras in the shed. I thought that it was nothing to lose situation because even if I didn't get any proof, I wouldn't lose anything, but if I did get the proof, then, well, it's all I would need. And, well, did my gamble work? Well, as crazy as it sounds, oh boy, yes it did. It worked. And Brent did sneak out of the venue, and well, as I said, there's no other spot than the shed, and they went there. But little did they know that while they were at the live telecast from the camera was being broadcast here at the event, yep, I'm live streaming. As soon as I saw them missing, I checked the cameras on my phone when I saw them kissing on the screen. I wasted no time in broadcasting to the whole entire show. The reaction of the people was priceless. Everybody was so darn shocked to see the good old lady B going at it with the priest boy. But that wasn't the best part of it, because the best reaction was when they came back and tried to act as if everything was normal. But the color drained out of their faces when they found out what was going on. Well, it was hilarious. How B was just kicked out of the church for her sin and infidelity, and not only B, but even Brent. He was not only kicked out of the church, but he was disowned by his own father for having relations with a married woman. I couldn't help but enjoy the whole thing. I mean, all these months ago, B had locked my daughter in the room because she was afraid that Jane would embarrass her. Call me evil, but seeing her get embarrassed in a room full of people was so satisfying. Well, that's not all. Little did B know that while all of this was happening, I sent the video to Rick and Hector as well. Right now, me and B are the only ones on the way home, and she's not talking to me at all, and I thought that she would shout at me or something, but she's gone completely speechless, and well, I am not complaining. I just can't wait to see what awaits her to come. Final update. Hey, guys, I'm just so sorry for not having given you an update on the situation for so long. But we were busy with so many things that I decided that I would write to you guys once all the mess was over. So, it's been 6 months since the hell of a fundraiser took place and since Hector kicked B out of the house. Yep, that's right. By the time we had reached home, Hector had already packed all of her stuff and threw it out the door. I've never seen him all this furious in all these years that I've known him. But I think his anger is justified, and even Rick was so angry that he was not ready to listen to any pleadings that B made. I was also glad that in spite of the anger, Hector and Rick has been considerate enough to leave Jane at her friend's house under the supervision of the parents, so that she would not have to witness this horrible event where her grandmother was getting kicked out. Because obviously, for her, none of this made sense as she had grown to like B a lot, so it was hard to explain to her why B wasn't living with us anymore. But eventually she came to terms with it. After getting kicked out from the family, B tried her best to get in contact with us and just to try to plead her way back into the house, but we were taking none of it. Without Rick to support her financially, she did not have much money, so she ended up living in a crappy old age home. Soon after, Hector filed for divorce, and yesterday, finally, their divorce was finalized. B did not get anything since it was mentioned in their prenup that cheating partners would get nothing from the other. Now she's left all abandoned by the people she loved.